For a deeper dive into the banking fallout, we're joined by Alicia Garcia-Herrero. She is Chief Economist, Asia Pacific at Natixis. Alicia, very good to have you with us. Credit Suisse may have dodged the bullet for now, and the SVB contagion is still developing. But there's a definite unraveling of investor confidence, both sides in the tech and banking counters. How do you see this developing?
Well, what has happened so far is that starting from SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, to Credit Suisse, we now have a global banking crisis. Let's call it banking crisis. It is basically now it's crossed the Atlantic, and of course, for Asian banks, what they really want to know is whether it's going to cross the Pacific. Basically, I think what we need to see for that not to happen is central bank coordinated action. We just have to remember what happened in March 2020 at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, where liquidity, dollar liquidity, basically shrunk to minimum levels comparable.
Well, we seem to have lost connection with Alicia. We'll try to get you back.
The world.
Okay, she's back.
I'm here. Yeah.
Sorry, Alicia, we seem to have lost you there for a little bit. Could you repeat that last?
Yes, sorry about that.
No problem.
Yes, I meant to say that we need coordinated action by central banks. We do not need to wait, like what has happened with Credit Suisse, for the Swiss National Bank to say, I'm helping you out. We need to see the Fed reoffering, because this is the third time this would happen in the last 15 years, swap lines across the globe. And that includes Singapore. It never happened with Hong Kong, but why not Hong Kong, South Korea, the Bank of Korea, you name it. Of course, the Bank of Japan. We want all of these big financial centers to have access to dollar liquidity now.
So from a market perspective, though, Asian credit spreads as well as forex currency seem to have reacted in a milder way compared to Asian stocks. Is this likely to change as well?
Yes, I mean, Asia, even before Credit Suisse, of course, the impact was more moderate than Europe, and simply because, it's just more insulated. We have much fewer links here in Asia with cases such as SVB, but bear in mind that we've learned that from Lehman and even from the pandemic. At the time, again, I repeat, March 2020, the problem were at that time Australian banks. Why? Because they had a lot of funding needs in dollar. So even if we feel insulated, there's always contagion channels that can hit us. We indeed need dollar liquidity upfront.
And the possibility of less rate hikes by the US, will that give pause for the central banks here in their tightening cycle? I mean, the Bank of Korea was among the most aggressive in Asia, 300 basis points in this current cycle.
Surely. I think everybody's pausing. We don't know whether the Fed will pause. I would argue that they might still do 25 basis points. But of course, Credit Suisse is another factor, because this is a global bank, perhaps to pause altogether. But what we are sure is that the hikes will be fewer, maybe not even there. And that helps central banks in the region, because they might need to, again, create their own liquidity lines. Korea did that during the pandemic, a kind of quantitative easing to provide liquidity to avoid also more recently a credit, dysfunctional credit market. So we, of course, need a calmer Fed for the time being for this episode of financial instability to end safely.
So you're saying we're in a full-blown banking crisis. In your latest report, your main concern or your biggest concern is the frontier markets, countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Sri Lanka. They may have trouble repaying their external debt if the SVB crisis widens. How big of a concern is this?
Sure. Well, for Vietnam, we just saw interest rate cuts. So, it's like Vietnam has already gone, ahead of the curve. But Vietnam doesn't have that concerns. Others do. I think the most obvious one is Pakistan at this point in time, negotiating a disbursement of its IMF program 4 months already. The latest basically arrangement would have had to be November, and we're still waiting. We have elections in October. The impression before SVB was that we could wait, but now the question is, can we really wait? So all of these frontier markets will need to tap, in my view, contingent facilities from the IMF, or at least have the disbursement they've been fighting for in the case of Pakistan earlier than previously expected.
In all likelihood, what are any black swan events out there with this crisis ongoing?
Well, Credit Suisse is not a black swan, because we knew that they were in this search for capital, and that it was well underway. But of course, this situation has caught them in between that process. I think a big black swan would be a major institution in Asia, because we're not expecting that. I'm basically saying that that's not. But what if, for whatever reason, there is an institution there, could be a lifer, which is severely affected by repricing of the yield curve in the U.S., or just affected by the duration of the yield curve, and the regulators are not quick enough to either lift mark-to-market rules. They were already lifted in Taiwan, for example, for lifers. So there may be some black swans in as far as these market reverberations really, really affect the capital of some institutions in Asia without, in a way, regulator reacting quickly enough to avoid that insolvency, which is a technical insolvency. It's related to, again, heavily volatile market movements.
Let's talk about the flip side of the SVB fallout. Are Asian startups likely to run into trouble raising funds? We've heard at least a dozen Hong Kong firms, for example, mainly those in biotech. SVB was their go-to foreign bank, for example.
No, totally. I think we need to realize that beyond the interest rate conundrum that we are into now, that the Fed should be hiking. We have very bad inflation data, and then now it might not even hike anymore. Beyond that macro picture, there's a micro picture, and the micro picture is basically private and venture capital, and that is hit at the core. Just imagine also that London is, of course, a secondary important center, and we already had, SVB taken over by HSBC, which is going to be much more cautious for obvious reasons. So all of the funding resources for private equity, I think, will be severely affected. And that's a problem for growth also in Asia, because this is where basically the new innovation opportunities basically were concentrated, indeed.
Alicia, very good to talk to you. Thank you for those insights, but we've run out of time. And that was Alicia Garcia-Herrero, Chief Economist, Natixis, speaking to us live from Hong Kong.